In terms of historically authentic first-person shooters, none recreate World War II battles and locations in such a well-researched way as Brothers in Arms. But as shown in our previous video covering the first title of this series, Road to Hill 30, no historical game is without inaccuracies. And in order to continue educating, we have created this video correcting the historical errors of the sequel Earned in Blood. We start with this game's new protagonist, the recently promoted Sergeant Joseph Hartsock, aka Red, getting interviewed by the true-to-life historical military journalist SLA Marshall. Red recounts the events he experienced in the Battle of Normandy to Marshall, which we play through as the missions of this game.
You and your men are in 2nd Squad, correct?
Oh, yes sir. 2nd took heavy losses in quarantine. I was with 3rd at the time.
During the first half of this game's chapters, before he becomes a sergeant and moves to 2nd Squad, Hartsock is depicted as a corporal in 3rd Squad, 3rd Platoon, Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division. But as was also a problem in the previous game, all 3rd Squads in 1944 were mortar squads, and not rifle squads like shown in the game.
Quarantine seems so minor next to what happened in St. Sauveur.
And your first objective as a sergeant was taking St. Sauveur?
Yes, sir.
St. Sauveur was never an objective for the 101st Airborne Division, but rather for the 82nd Airborne Division. We are briefly shown a scene of our stick in the airplane before jumping on D-Day, June 6th. Just like it was in Road to Hill 30 from Baker's perspective, all the troopers are missing their famous yellow cavalry gloves, as well as the gas brassers that should be around their arms. Most of the troopers are also shown not having scrim on their helmets. Every soldier in the 2nd Battalion of the 502nd would have worn scrim, as proven by both photographic evidence and equipment lists of D-Day. In addition, troopers of the 2nd Battalion 502nd were known to have worn white gauze around their left shoulder to allow for easy identification on the ground. This too is missing from the game. In the video we made on the previous Brothers in Arms game, we did not say anything about the uniforms being CC2'd because we were uncertain if the skins showed it or not, but with the concurrence of some commenters, we can now safely say that it is missing. The M42 uniforms on these airborne troops should be anti-gas impregnated with CC2, which makes them look darker. The title card of the first chapter tells us we dropped in near St. Miracuise at 2:30 AM, even though the 2nd Battalion of the 502nd Regiment 101st Division dropped almost 2 hours beforehand at 12:48 at Drop Zone A in reality. 2:30 AM would be when some of the last sticks of the 82nd Division jumped. It also doesn't match up at all with the time in the first game, which stated 1:15 AM, even though we are just shown being in the same airplane as Baker. Since this 2:30 AM time is shown after we landed, it could however be implied that Red hung in this tree for over an hour and could explain why he is then saved by a trooper from the 82nd. That must have landed just minutes ago. Maybe the air sickness tablets made him fall asleep or something? This all seems unlikely however, and something Red would mention to the interviewer in his narration if it was the case, even if the game was trying to depict him as jumping at Road to Hill 30's time of 1:15 AM. As stated in the video for that game, it is also an incorrect time, being around 30 minutes after the 2nd Battalion of the 502nd dropped here in actuality. The first enemies we encounter are Osttruppen of the 709th Static Infantry Division. All Osttruppen in the game are heard speaking German.
Das kann nicht wahr sein, das kann nicht... Scheiße! Scheiße!
Even though most of them did not, since these were men from Eastern Europe. In this area, it was particularly Georgians of Ost Battalions 795 and 797, in addition to some surrounding Russians and Ukrainians of Ost Battalions like 561 and 635, so they should be heard speaking those corresponding languages. Their officers did speak German, but we see none of those. All of them in-game wear M43 field caps when they should be wearing helmets. All of the swastikas on the German uniforms and vehicles have been either removed or replaced with the Balkenkreuz, likely due to censoring policies. All of the Osttruppen riflemen have no piping on their shoulder straps. They would be wearing either the post-April 1943 bottle green ones with pink Waffenfarbe, or with the pre-April 1943 red Waffenfarbe. Every single one of them apparently have the same rank of Obergefreiter, as evident by them all having the chevron sleeve insignias. None of them have any color Litzen. The Osttruppen here wore either bottle green ethnic tabs with pink Waffenfarbe, Georgian red color tabs, silver line and button color insignia, or just standard German Litzen. The wing tips of the breast eagle on all of the Heer forces in game show that they are actually SS ones instead of Heer ones. Some of the Osttruppen would also be seen wearing the diamond swastika instead. All of the Germans lack specific unit insignia. These Osttruppen should be seen wearing their volunteer patch, and if any had served in the Russian Liberation Army before being sent to France, some might still have the POA patch on their opposite sleeve. All German soldiers in the game have Y straps with A frames. Y straps are not actually as universally worn by regular German infantry as the game makes out, and the A frames would not be this common at this stage, being more of an early war item. It is also worth noting that some of the Osttruppen would not be seen wearing much of this equipment like the gas mask canisters, since they're in a static division and so could store a lot of their stuff locally. Every Heer soldier in the game all have the same fresh looking greenish shade of M42 uniform with their tunic collars open. Although this uniform was prevalent on the Western Front, it is still worth mentioning that we should also find M36, M40, M43 and summer M42 HVT uniforms mixed in with them too, in different shades of Feldgrau and at least some worn with closed collars. The Stielhandgranate appears as the only grenade on the Germans in-game, despite the often media forgotten Model 39 Einhandgranate actually being the most produced German grenade of World War II. When the Germans throw the Model 24 Stielhandgranate, they are incorrectly depicted with its cap still on. The enemies in this game throw their grenades so incredibly rarely that I was not even able to record footage of it and had to resort to using a picture from multiplayer instead. The German Kar98K rifle seems to actually be modelled on the shorter length Czechoslovak VZ33 carbine. Although these were used in some capacity by the Wehrmacht, we could not find any evidence of its use in Normandy, and they should certainly not be seen in place of the standard German K98K. These Kar98K stand-ins appear as the only weapon carried by the Osttruppen in the first chapter. This is likely a part of the game's difficulty scaling system, since we do see the Germans gain more varied loadouts in the upcoming chapters. It is however still inaccurate for them to have such a lacking loadout here, and we should see at least one SMG per German rifle squad. Less well-equipped units like the Osttruppen were also known to possess older rifles like Gewehr 98s, and various captured weapons like Soviet PPSH-41s brought over from the Eastern Front. The quote-unquote Kar98K lacks hinges, so the adjustable sight can't actually function. The striker of all bolt-action rifles in-game, including the later snipers, are incorrectly static. Brothers in Arms may have not had a PC or console title released in over 16 years since 2008.
This is not your stop. There's more road ahead. How do you feel about snow?
But there have actually since been multiple Brothers in Arms games made for the ever-growing mobile market, and there is no better place to play these and others like Call of Duty Mobile than on the world's top choice for gaming phones, Red Magic, this video's sponsor. I have been sent our all-new Red Magic Pro 10 and it is supreme. This phone is incredibly powerful, running with a 1.5K 144Hz display with high FPS capability and even an inbuilt fan cooler like you would expect to see on a gaming PC. Red Magic phones have customizable shoulder triggers similar to a console controller and come included with a wide range of changeable settings like altering your crosshair, vibrations or even sound equalizer. It is a great everyday use phone too, being equipped with dual 50MP cameras on a flat back design and having a 100 watt fast charging battery providing up to 52 hours of power, while unlike most other phones still having a headphone jack. With each generation of phone, Red Magic's devices are constantly improving their specs but never jack up their prices, and a lot of their phones come in a ton of cool colors and designs to choose from. So if you're looking to maximize your mobile's power and gaming experience, then check out Red Magic and their top of the line phones by using my link in the description and pinned comment. Now back to the inaccuracies. Red gets out of his harness by smashing some buckle or other on his chest. A quick release mechanism like this was not introduced for the American paratroopers until after the Battle of Normandy. All of the Mark II grenades in-game are missing their spoons. Our first objective sees us find our leg bag. It is quite a miracle we actually find it in the dark, especially given how far away it is. And when we do, our character only picks up the gun from the bag and not all his other equipment. The weapon we pick out from it is an M1A1 carbine, but as a corporal we should be armed with an M1 rifle. The same goes for the many other carbine wielding corporals we go on to meet. The icon for the M1A1 carbine with the foldable stock appears as the regular M1 carbine with the wooden stock in the situational awareness view. The first-person models of many of the firearms look weirdly short and stubby, while the third-person models look fine. This seems to have been a consequence of the fact that this game was made to be compatible with the 4:3 screen aspect ratio that was widely used in the early 2000s, but even when changed to this, a number of the weapons' proportions are still off. We are introduced to the game's mechanic that lets you refill ammo by asking your squad mates. Throughout the game, as long as you're not holding a German gun, you can ask and receive any type of ammo from any soldier, even if they don't visibly or would logically carry any of it, like getting SMG rounds from a rifleman. Although a gameplay feature, it is still obviously erroneous. Apparently, one grenade is all it takes to deform the barrel of a flak-bearing 38. It takes immense heat to deform metal, and fragmentation grenades do not have enough strength to do this. We encounter Corporal Paddock, who should also have an M1 Garand. A corporal would really not be allocated a submachine gun, and please don't get me started on the overblown, tactically acquired myth. The grease gun he is wielding is the M3A1 variant, as seen from the lack of a charging handle. This wasn't introduced until December of 1944, 6 months after the Normandy invasion. It's very unlikely for an airborne soldier to have field modified it like this in Normandy at this point. Whenever Paddock gets killed, we can pick up his grease gun, which our character never cocks to rechamber a round when reloading. Despite wielding an M3A1 grease gun, Paddock is wearing 5-cell magazine pouches for the Thompson SMG. Troopers wearing the 5-cell Thompson mag pouches are always seen having them strapped vertically under webbing. This was only really done by Pathfinders, and even they pretty much immediately switched it to their belt once in country, due to how inconvenient this vertical wearing was. Having apparently not been made aware that the hyper-inflated prices of the Weimar Republic were resolved decades ago, the Opel Blitz trucks are still on diets, resulting in them having a way too skinny bed and cabin and wheel arches that stick out too much. We go on to meet Lieutenant Colonel Cole, another real-life figure. He is seen accompanied by 2 men, which when combined with our group makes up a total of 6 troopers here, when he had roughly 75 to 80 men at this time in reality. The amount of combatants being way too low is a recurring problem in the series, and was likely done due to technical limitations, or the devs wanting the combat to be more small and concise, but it is still very wrong historically.
Where are you paratroopers from?
Kansas, sir.
He means what unit?
Oh, 101st, F Company. I'm 2nd Squad. He's 3rd.
There are 3 F companies in the 101st Division, Paddock, so from which one are you? An airborne soldier would state his correct unit, in this case the 502nd Regiment. Way too many of the privates throughout this game carry M1A1 carbines instead of M1 Garands. Only the assist machine gunner would have a carbine in an airborne rifle squad. In spite of most of them wielding carbines, many of the soldiers wear a non-corresponding, weird-looking M1923 rifle cartridge belt. The 502nd Paratroop Infantry Regiment, or PIR troopers, should wear M1936 pistol belts with rigger pouches, which photo evidence and equipment lists show were exclusively worn by them in Normandy. Many of the troopers wear double-button compass pouches on their belts. These would only be carried by commanding officers, meaning all of the enlisted ranks should not have them. German soldiers manning the MGs do not have any specific machine gunner equipment that they should carry on their web gear, like the MG Tascha, cleaning kit, pistol, etc. The MG42 appears as the only machine gun used by the Germans in-game. Especially for less well-equipped units like the Ostruppen, they should have older ones like the MG34, MG13 and MG08, in addition to even some captured MGs like Soviet DP-27s and Maxims. The stock of the MG42 is black, along with the whole gun, making it look more like a modern MG3 than to the wooden and silver parts of the MG42. All of the MG42s are also shown with drum magazines and in the heavy configuration, but do not have the periscope sight that comes with the Lafette tripod. All of the mounted machine guns in-game, including the later seen Browning ones, fire unlimitedly without any reload, cooldown or barrel change animation. The German ambush with horse-driven carts did actually occur, but towards the end of it, another IRL person, Lieutenant Colonel Cassidy, arrives, even though he was not in the area during this ambush. In reality, Lieutenant Colonel Cassidy was stationed near a crossroad farmhouse to the south near St. Martin de Varville. We begin to see some of the US paratroopers with the M1 bayonet, but they are always seen hanging weirdly in the wrong spot on their belt.
There's an abandoned gun battery not far from here, just outside of St. Martin. I'm setting up CP in a farmhouse there, so you men stick with me. We've got a lot of work to do.
While the gun battery at St. Martin de Varville was indeed an objective for the 502nd, saying that it is not far from here is an understatement. It is several miles from where we have landed. Lieutenant Colonel Cole even had to use the remaining German horses and carts to ferry his 75 to 80 men and their equipment to the St. Martin battery in actuality, which the game never shows or mentions. The following D-Day chapter sees us take the St. Martin de Varville village.
The good news is I managed to find a few of my boys from 82nd. Still trying to round them up to make the big push towards Saint-Sauveur. This isn't even our sector.
Saint-Sauveur was not an immediate objective for the 82nd Division on or after D-Day. Saint-Miraculous was. Besides, every 82nd soldier would be far from Saint-Sauveur at this point, since none of the drop zones were in the vicinity of that town.
Yeah, you're supposed to be off finding some castle on the road to Cherbourg.
Saint-Sauveur is to the west of our position here in St. Martin de Varville, not on the northern road to Cherbourg. The farmhouse that Cassidy uses as his casualty collection point is just behind his actual command post. At the time, the collection point was bristling with troops. There were so many wounded soldiers that the surgeon ran out of plasma, yet we only see 3 soldiers in the barn. Even though there are several medical supplies lying all around the barn with the wounded, like plasma, there are no medics or other medical personnel seen anywhere. The same goes for the German aid station we find later in this mission too.
I was told the Krauts have a makeshift Kraut aid station in the church in St. Martin. Bring all the bandages and plasma you can find. We need it now, Corporal. These men can't wait.
Hot sock. Save my friends.
The village of St. Martin was not cleared because they needed to recover medical supplies. Cassidy instead recovered medical supplies, including the much needed plasma, by scavenging the fields looking for them in equipment drops or left behind bags from paratroopers. We locate an M1911A1 among the supplies. Its slide does not draw back even when the chamber has been emptied before reloading. The distance between the farmhouse and the cross next to the road to St. Martin is much greater in real life. The distance to the town is also much further. We should also pass right through the aforementioned St. Martin battery along this road, but it is nowhere to be seen in game. A small patrol led by Sergeant Snyder conducted an aggressive patrol against this village. The patrol was made by several soldiers and not just 3 men as the game suggests. Throughout the game, we will notice that there is a complete absence of any civilians, even though none of them were evacuated and Normandy was still full of them. They suffered greatly from artillery, bombings, firefights, and German reprisals. Any German presence that was in this village would most likely have been the artillery troops stationed at the battery, so the 1261st Coastal Artillery Regiment, not Osttruppen of the 709th Division as stated in game. The Osttruppen armed with MP40s do now have infantry white piping on their shoulder patches, rather than not as is the case with all the others. This seems to show that the devs mixed up Waffenfarbe with Tressa. The ones with MP40s would be squad leaders and thus have NCO Tressa and other such insignia. The bolt of the MP40 is static and apparently stuck in the closed bolt configuration when it should be open. We begin to see these MG42 sandbag positions many times throughout the game, but apparently the Germans who built them took way too many of their Pervitin Met pills, as they are very illogically built. In this position, the MG would not be able to reload as the drum mag and the feed tray are stuck between the sandbags. The sandbags are also in the way of the sights, which would mean the gun can't be aimed properly. There is no evidence to suggest that there was an aid station in the village church. One of the soldiers in Cassidy's casualty collection point reported sniper fire from the church, and Sergeant Snyder suggested the church was used as an observation post, as Snyder had destroyed rangefinders, radios, and telephones in the church tower itself with grenades. These show that the church was occupied, but there are no mentions of it containing an aid station. Even logically speaking, it would not make sense to have one in there, as in normal circumstances you do not want to draw fire onto an aid station by placing snipers and observers in it.
Those are Navy guns! Our boys must be landing soon! Brace yourself, Red, and pray those sailors can aim!
While the naval bombardment did target artillery batteries inland, including the one near St. Martin, it's highly doubtful that so many shells would land inside the village. There are no reports confirming this, and it seems the buildings remained largely intact, while a bombardment like this would completely wreck the village. We run into Private First Class Leggett, who iconically wears glasses throughout this series, even though American airborne that served as frontline troops were required to have 20/20 eyesight. Some commenters in our Road to Hill 30 video were pointing out the rare exception to this of James Flanagan in this photo, but this does not beat the fact that it was still an official rule of the airborne. Almost all other unique examples of paratroopers with glasses were not frontline infantry, and were mostly only accepted in because they already served with distinction on other fronts before they joined the airborne. The third D-Day chapter sees us at the Hamu Fermel hamlet, which the game mislabels as Hout Fermel. Once again, the fighting here saw many more soldiers involved. Even the after-action report for this chapter included in the game's extras showed that the actual action included many more paratroopers than are presented in-game. In this mission, we encounter Heer infantry of the 91st Luftlanded Division. However, like with the Osttruppen, they all have SS Eagles on their tunics, all are apparently Übergefreiters, and the NCOs lack the white piping that should be on their collars. All of their helmets have decals, which had stopped being put on the Stahlhelms earlier in the war. Besides that, the decals are the same eagle on both sides, when they should be two different ones or just a single one. While the after-action report for this mentions Flak 88s towed by half-tracks, those half-tracks were most likely SDKSZ-7s, rather than the 251s we see in-game. Private Fryer is wielding a carbine but wears BAR pouches that are also on a pistol belt, which is very wrong. We find Corporal Corian revealing himself after hiding from the Germans in the waist of a cesspool. He has absolutely no ammo pouches on him for some reason. He has an M1A1 Thompson, which should again be an M1 Garand since he's a corporal. He also for some reason chooses to completely submerge his weapon in the waist too, which somehow does not cause it to jam and instead is seen working fine afterwards. The M1919 that Staff Sergeant Hazy is seen for some reason firing from the hip instead of the tripod has the sound effect of the MG42. The Browning MGs are depicted with a static belt that has been cut off to a very short length. Hazy wields a Thompson SMG but wears M1 pouches for pistol and carbine mags. This marks the end of the D-Day chapters of this game, but just like how Baker travelled a ridiculous amount on D-Day in Road to Hill 30, Herzog 2, who must have been thinking he was a Tour de France participant, visits far too many places within 20 or so hours of the single day of June 6th. This becomes evident when we look at this map made by one of our researchers, Davidson, that combines the paths of Herzog in red, Baker in blue, and then their path together in purple throughout both games. It is incredibly unlikely that our paratroopers would be able to be in so many places on D-Day. They would have at the least had to stay at one of their objectives. Also, the game often does not give any explanation on how exactly our characters travelled between a lot of these areas so quickly. The June 7th D+1 chapter brings us near the Barquette Locks. In the intro narration, Herzog calls the village of Heaville Heisville.
We spent most of the night near a village called Heisville.
It is understandable that an American would pronounce it like that, but the game itself actually misspells the village name in both the subtitles here, as well as in the title card of the next chapter. The La Barquette area where we are was never fought over by the 502nd PIR. It was the 501st who attacked and held the area on June 6th and 7th as it was one of their main D-Day objectives. Again, there are way too few troopers fighting here. By June 7th, the Americans had amassed a force of over 250 paratroopers to hold this area. We start this level with a BAR. This is acceptable, however, as the game explicitly tells us how we got it.
After some rummaging, I found a BAR in the back of a crashed glider.
What does not add up is how he still, by default, carries an M1A1 carbine in addition to it. No sane soldier would carry two primary weapons like this into the battlefield. Herzog's default guns also keep changing throughout the chapters. His carbine is swapped for a Garand in the next level, which then changes to a grease gun afterwards. But then both his BAR and grease gun disappear and get replaced with another Garand and a Thompson towards the end of the game. It all makes no sense and does not match with the rifle he would be given as a corporal or sergeant. We are up against Fallschirmjäger or paratroopers of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment. They are wearing what is supposed to be Sumpftarm smocks, but the brownish colour is much too dark and the pattern seems off. They should also have more variation, with Luftwaffe Splintertarn also being common, and just regular green smocks should be there as well. The same goes for their helmets. They wear plain Feldgrau ones with decals that should not be common. Most of their helmets should be camouflaged with either covers or paint and other camouflage. At this point in the war, many Fallschirmjäger were also issued regular M40 or M42 helmets. We should see some of these for variation. These Alt bands that these Fallschirmjäger carry on their backs are in the oak leaf pattern, which was only used by SS troops. All Fallschirmjägers have either Feldwebel or Unteroffizier Luftwaffe insignia on their collars, which are both NCO ranks. We see none of the more common lower enlisted ranks anywhere among them. Fallschirmjäger armed with the Kart 98K stand-ins carry STG-44 mag pouches instead of rifle pouches. Their belt buckles are regular hair ones instead of Luftwaffe. The supplies that drop in, which we mark with smoke grenades, were actually dropped earlier on the morning of June 7th at 6:30 AM, hours before the 12 PM time of this mission. The devs likely chose 12 PM because saying that it took place earlier would somewhat contradict how Red was in Virvel at 9 AM in the previous game. Also, when the containers were parachuted into the marshes, they were beaten by the fires and could not be recovered like we do in game. We meet Colonel Johnson, who is a true-to-life 501st paratrooper who fought here, though he and his men have the hearts of the 502nd on the side of their helmets, which should instead be the diamonds of the 501st. In accordance with this series tradition of giving half the soldiers completely non-corresponding ammo pouches to their weapons, Johnson is carrying a Garand rifle but has SMG mag pouches on his webbing. The German counter-attack we fight off did not occur until 3 PM, and when it did, the Germans never reached the lock like is shown here, as the outer perimeter a few hundred yards north of the locks prevented the breakthrough. We are next brought to Chateau Colombier on D+2 June 8.
Sergeant Hassey sent me with 3 guys to check out a bombed chateau. We needed it for an aid station.
The Chateau Colombier had already been taken by US forces 2 days prior on D-Day, after a light firefight that led to the Germans retreating with no casualties taken. By the date of this chapter, the chateau was already serving as an American aid station set up by the 326th Medical Company since D-Day, so this whole mission of taking it from the Germans by force after a large fight on June 8 makes no sense and is complete fiction.
This would have been a nice little house if we hadn't bombed the holy shit out of it.
The Chateau Colombier wasn't bombed and shelled until the following day, June 9th.
Just recon, right? I don't know, DeSola. Every time I hear the word scout or recon, I bring extra ammo.
Just seems like it's never over.
In reality, this would just be ridiculous. A small scouting party like this would not full-on attack an enemy barracks. They'd get reinforcements and organize an assault. Although likely being caused by this game's difficulty scaling system, there are way too many MP40 wielding Unterofficers in this chapter. There would only really be one of these per German rifle squad.
You guys were sent here too?
Who sent you? And why were you sent here alone? Tanks would almost always operate in groups, and obviously there are no reports of tanks being at this chateau since it was an aid station at this time. The tank is an M5 Stuart model, while the tactical view incorrectly identifies it as an M5A1. It also says it belongs to the 4th Infantry Division. While the 70th Tank Battalion was indeed attached to this division, it's weird that they don't just say 70th Tank Battalion. The anti-tank launchers used by the Germans are Panzerfaust 60s, which did not enter service until September of 1944 after the Battle of Normandy. The Faust Patrona or Panzerfaust 30 would be more appropriate replacements. We come across an outdated Stug model. Stugs would likely not be in this area anyway, as German armour was further west fighting the 82nd Airborne. Interestingly, it is a Stug 3 Auf F, which is a newer model than the one in the last game, but is still outdated anyway. It is also stated as belonging to the 100 Tank Battalion, which did not have Stugs and was not present here. The tanks in game are way too strong and have no weak points, taking numerous Panzerfaust shots and tank cannon fire to destroy. When the tanks fight each other, they do so at a ridiculously close range. Actual tank combat occurred at a much larger distance of 500 meters or so, as their doctrine would call for. All of the German tank commanders in game are wearing black Panzertrooper uniforms, which should not be the case of crews of Stugs. They would be wearing greenish Feldgrau ones as seen in these pictures. Despite being Heer or army tankers, they have SS Eagles on their sleeves. The collar has white piping along it, which makes no sense. If this model is a tank commander, then it should be pink like the piping on the shoulder straps here. At the end of the mission, Baker shows up to collect us in a German Opel Blitz truck that has apparently not succumbed to friendly fire while being driven around Normandy. Before being brought back to partake in the Battle of Bloody Gulch or Hill 30, Hartsock reminds us of this.
I've been hearing a lot of talk around here that Baker saved us at Hill 30. Bringing in the 2nd Armored Division and all.
Like stated in our review of the previous game, Baker was not the one that guided the 2nd Armored Division to the American line. The tanks found their own way from Isigny to Carentan to Hill 30 where the paratroopers were engaged. The time given at the start of this chapter is even more ridiculous than in the last game. At 3 PM, the American armor had already arrived an hour ago, and the battle was as good as over. We start in the same position as we were in the first game, where the 506th were IRL, yet that regiment is nowhere to be seen. Our unit of the 502nd also did not fight in the line like this, but made a flanking action around the right. What do you mean, clear the left flank? Our line should be extending hundreds of yards further to the left with hundreds of more troops. Leggett is shown to be a private first class by the stripe on his sleeve. As a radio operator, he should be a technician 4th or 5th grade and have these stripes instead. In addition to his rifle, Leggett also carries an M1911A1 pistol, which will be very unlikely for him to have. In the following game of this series, Hell's Highway, it is shown this was Matthew's quote-unquote death pistol that Leggett took from Allen and Garnett after their deaths on June 9th. However, this was a very clear retcon from Gearbox, and does not explain why he is always seen having the pistol with a holster even before receiving it from Allen and Garnett. The mission sees us fight our way through the German lines to blow up their tanks with captured Panzerfausts. This might be loosely based on the bazooka shots fired by troopers of E Company 506th against an approaching Stug, or a patrol made by 502nd troops, which both happened in about the same location. However, these events occurred before the battle even started and had different circumstances. An extended sortie towards the enemy like this during the battle simply did not happen. Our forces are under a heavy armoured assault here, so why would they even want to push all the way into the open towards the advancing Germans? Having said that, where are all the Germans? We are running straight into their attacking forces, and yet we literally come across a small group of them in a sandbag position with some surrounding ones too, and that's about it. We also, like in the last game, only see 17th SS Panzer Grenadiers, while there should also be a large number of 6th Fallschirmjäger troops here. The SS soldiers only wear jack boots, even though low boots and gaiters should also be common. The Panzer Grenadiers are clearly wearing Wehrmacht uniforms beneath their smocks and do not have any SS runes or rank insignia. Way too many of the 17th SS Panzer Grenadiers are armed with STG-44s. This weapon was not nearly this common in Normandy at this time. When we pick up the STG-44, it's called the STG-44 machine gun, even though it is an automatic rifle. The STG-44 incorrectly has a static, non-reciprocating charging handle. The front sight post has been incorrectly mounted on the gas plug, and the fire selector and safety are missing. All of the vehicle license plates in the game are Wehrmacht ones. For the chapters where we face the 17th Panzer Grenadiers, they should be SS ones. The tanks we encounter are Panzer IV AUFGs. Although they are a newer and less outdated model than the ones in the last game, it's still wrong, since the Battle of Bloody Gulch involved the 17th SS Sturmgeschütz Abteilung, which consisted only of Stugs along with a few Marder 3s of the division's Panzerjäger Abteilung. The American 2nd Armored tanks that arrive with Baker at the end are seen coming from the wrong direction. They came from the rear in reality and not our right flank.
This is when you were promoted to sergeant, correct? After you took Carentan?
Yes, sir. Had a little ceremony at the base of the church. But it was cut short by German mortar fire coming from the south side of town.
Those mortars are coming from the train yard about a block away. Red, you go down the alley behind those houses and push through.
Yeah, this level is just another completely ridiculous fictional one. The whole point of the Battle of Hill 30 was to fight off the German counterattack towards Carentan. The 101st were successful in doing so. So tell me, how are there suddenly Germans in the south of the town firing mortars at us? While some sources say there were still small groups of Germans around Carentan harassing the Americans, these would not mount an attack on the town itself. Besides, on the 14th, the 502nd Regiment was already moving towards Bopt. This mission might be based on the fighting that did take place around the railway station during the actual attack on Carentan on June 12th. But if so, then why didn't the devs just put this mission on that date then? Also, if there was an attack like this, then there would be many more 101st troops to fight it off. Carentan was at this moment the staging area for the division, and a whole battalion of the 401st Glider Regiment was there, so why we only see our squad makes no sense. We begin to see many of the troopers armed with Garans wearing carbine and pistol M1 pouches. The following chapter seizes on the same day, still in Carentan, pushing in to clear the streets. But just like with the last mission, a fight like this in Carentan at this moment just did not happen. We find Peugeot 202 cars with dead soldiers in them wearing regular hair uniforms. There were no hair units present in Carentan during this time.
There are Germans all over the area and they got a tank. We've been running from it since we split up. We have to clear out this fortune before we can do anything else. Had no fucking idea there would be so many. Shit!
Seriously? This has to be one of the most ridiculous points so far. To have a single German tank suddenly show up in Carentan after the armoured counterattack was already forced back. There was never even any German armour in Carentan during the Battle of Normandy before or after the fight for Hill 30. This chapter sees us fight for the town of Bopt on the 15th of June D+9. However, Bopt had already been in the hands of the 82nd Division since the 13th of June. The 82nd by the 15th of June were fighting north and northeast of the town. There were no Germans anywhere in or near the town itself at this stage as depicted in game.
That town was supposed to be the link-up for the 82nd and the 101st. The last stop on the road to Saint-Sauveur. Hell, we walked in expecting to see some airborne.
The link-up with the 101st Division also happened on the 13th, after the town had been taken. Our forces of the 101st were not involved in the fighting. The attack on Bopt was not supported by American armour, so where the Sherman came from is anyone's guess. The Sherman is labelled as an M4A3, but is actually an earlier M4A1 model with the cast hull. The M4A3 would not even be in service yet in June 1944. The M2 Browning on top of the tank should have a foldable lateral aperture sight. We encounter Fallschirmjäger troops in this chapter, but Bopt was first held and then counterattacked by troops of the 17th SS Division. Since the 100th Replacement Tank Battalion was attached to the 91st Division, we should also see some of their troops. The German forces were also much stronger than we see in game, involving at least 2 companies and several tanks from the 100th Replacement Tank Battalion. We begin to see FG-42s among the Fallschirmjägers, though the ones carrying them all have STG-44 pouches, rather than the FG-42 bandoliers or mag pouches. There were no Panzer IVs at Bopt. The 100th Tank Replacement Battalion that fought here consisted mostly of captured French tanks, primarily the Renault R-35 and Hotchkiss H-35. According to the tactical view, the German tanks belong to the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment. The Fallschirmjäger never use tanks, and even if they are trying to say that they are just attached to them, it still does not add up, as again, the 100th Tank Replacement Battalion were attached to the 91st Luftlandedivision Division. This is a really strange error, considering how both this game and Road to Hill 30 use the 100th Tank Battalion in the wrong places many times, but here in BOPT, where this replacement battalion actually fought, the devs suddenly decide not to use them. Like, why? The US paratroopers managed to knock out several tanks with bazookas and gammon grenades, not with tank support and stolen Panzerfaust. The Panzer IV commanders have Herr Litzen on their collars. Although this was acceptable to be seen on the earlier Stug tankers, it should not be the case for any Wehrmacht Panzer IV commanders who would have the Totenkopf tabs instead. Towards the end of the level, we meet troops of the 82nd Division, but there's literally only 2 of them, with 1 tank that should not be there. The whole 2nd Battalion of the 508 were involved in clearing the town on June 13th. We can see that Doyle belongs to the 2nd Squad, 2nd Platoon, C Company, 205th PIR 82nd Airborne Division. This must be a typo, since the 505th belonged to the 82nd Airborne, not the 205th. But then it's still inaccurate, because it was the 508th PIR that fought at BOPT, not the 505th. The following chapter sees us fight outside of BOPT on the same day of June 15th, which is still a wrong date, as the fighting here happened on June 14th. Once again, our division of the 101st did not partake in the fighting outside BOPT. It was all 508 PIR troops of the 82nd Division.
Those German bastards that retreated from BOPT have taken up some strong positions in the hedgerows south of town.
According to the war diaries of the 508 PIR, the fighting around BOPT took place west and north of the village, not south. We encounter Heer forces of the 91st Division in this chapter. Although at least more accurate than the Fallschirmjäger of the last level, the 17th SS Division that primarily fought here are still nowhere to be found. In this mission, almost every one of the Heer soldiers are Unterofficers, and are all carrying STG-44s, which is just ludicrous. The fighting in this chapter is presented as an American attack on German defensive positions, while most of it in actuality was the 82nd holding their position and fighting off German counterattacks. Like Baker did when blowing up Rommel's asparagus in the first game, Red must also have pockets that go to Narnia, for there is no way he would be able to carry this insane amount of TNT on him to blow up all these gaps and flak guns. We can find an M1 bazooka, even though the M1A1 or M9 would be far more appropriate for the airborne to have at this stage. The player's reload animation also does not show us connecting the wire to the rocket of the launcher, thus we should not be able to fire it.
Take these captured German plans to the 82nd. They're about to attack the town of St. Sauveur. These should help them out. Make sure they know the 101st found them.
There are 0 reports of 101st troops having found maps that would aid the 82nd in taking St. Sauveur. Even if they did, it wouldn't be up to a rifle squad to deliver them. It would go through the unit's intelligence officers.
Well, me and Baker, way before either one of us made sergeant, used to joke about how jumping in a squad of 13 is bad luck.
That's a bit juvenile, don't you think, Sergeant?
Well, we were all so young then, sir. We even went so far as to paint a 13 on the back of our helmets.
Again, with this 13 in a squad nonsense. I know it's because 13 is seen as an unlucky number and all, but it still makes no sense and is just a MacGuffin the developers made up. An airborne rifle squad consisted of 12 men including the squad leader, and a jump stick consisted of anywhere from 14 to 18 men, not 13. The fighting in this chapter begins at 6 AM, but the attack on the heights east of St. Sauveur started at 5 AM in reality, so the fighting should already be going on by this time.
Want to stick around for a bit? We're short-handed around here. Need all the men we can muster.
The whole game, St. Sauveur has been built up as being the main objective, and now we're short-handed? No. The 82nd attacked with several regiments and was joined by the 60th Regiment of the 9th Infantry Division. In spite of me sounding like a damn parrot again, we as 101st Troops should not be here. The initial attack of paratroopers of the 82nd failed, and they had to be replaced by glider-borne troops of the 325th Regiment. We see none of them in this chapter though. The glider-borne troops were supported by Shermans of A Company 746 Tank Battalion, not by M10 tank destroyers of the 899th Tank Destroyer Battalion. The area was defended by air forces of the 265th Infantry Division, not 6 Fallschirmjäger troops. Far too many of the Fallschirmjägers are armed with scoped FG-42s. These were quite rare, and if they were issued, only one member of a section got them. Despite the chapter making a rather big point out of it,
how we needed to clear out the damn 88s.
And watch out for the 88s.
I think you want there to be 88s.
You guys didn't say nothing about no fucking 88!
in reality, there are no reports of 88mm guns being in this area. There are no reports of the first bridge on the Rue de Moulin being blown up. And in accordance with the attack taking place further to the east, there's also no reports of this large mill being fortified by German troops like we see here.
So you had to dig the Germans out of Saint-Sauveur?
Yeah, we realized once we actually got to the castle just how much digging we had to do.
Here we go again. This chapter depicting intense fighting in Saint-Sauveur is complete bullshit. No, the Americans did not have to dig out Germans from the town. After the heights had been taken in the early morning, the 82nd could observe the remaining German forces abandoning the town from their positions. They never had to go into the town to flush them out. The airborne instead moved through the town and established a perimeter 2 kilometers outside it with next to no resistance. And again, this town was an objective of the 82nd Division. We as 101st Division troops should not be here. I am really starting to think that Herzog also keeps just imagining himself having fought in all these fabricated battles. There were, very much so, no German tanks here, and it was also not the 17th SS Division who was fighting around the area, but the aforementioned air forces of the 265th Infantry Division. The final chapter sees us still in Saint-Sauveur because, just like in the Quarantaine missions, apparently the devs needed 2 chapters to show this completely made up fight. Since there were no Germans left in Saint-Sauveur, we can all be happy because Doyle and Page should both be alive still. In the latter half of the mission, the town is bombed, and throughout the chapter we can see a large amount of AA fire going up into the air. Of course, neither of these would happen at this time. Regardless, why are our air forces even bombing the town when they should know that we are in here? And why do the bombs seem to have no effect on the German soldiers even when they land right on top of them? Doyle is reduced to a light mist by a Panzer IV, but his division patch survives, nearly unscathed. Not even the airborne label is detached from the bottom part. The devs are really throwing out all sense of reality here for the sake of drama. And so we are left with a total of over 170 historical inaccuracies. For more, click on this video covering this game's predecessor, Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30. Massive thanks to our other researchers K-Nyne, Davidson and Michael Akkerman for their integral work in making this video possible. And of course, thank you for watching. This has been the Frosty One, out.